What if we could make the conversation around legacy a global discussion? Welcome to the Design Your Legacy podcast. This lovely morning, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Peter Brock. He is the founder as well as managing partner to Be Wiser. Welcome, Mr. Brock.
Hello, Angelina. Thanks for having me here. It's great to speak to a mainly American audience, but let's try to make it global, as you say. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And you're joining today from, I believe, the Berlin, Germany area. And definitely this podcast reaches many English speaking countries. And I'm thrilled with the people that are tuning in. So we'll just jump right in with the first question. So, would you provide our listeners a little bit about your background and history in the financial and family office world?
Yes, it's a pleasure. So I used to be a banker, an investment banker doing M&A deals, but then I kind of worked more and more for family businesses. So rather than for the big corporates, I always like to focus more on family businesses. And then I went on to work with family offices, so on the wealth management side of family businesses. And the last job in a big organization was that I was the head of family office services at Ernst & Young at EY for Middle East and Africa. And now, for a few years now, I'm a self-employed single family officer. I do Be Wiser, as you said. We speak about that, but I'm also an impact investor and very much focusing on trying to save the world with capital, basically. Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. And one of the things in our preamble when we chatted in our kind of our icebreaker conversation was we talked about this idea of legacy, that it can be something that an individual develops on their own, but there can also be a family legacy, as well as this idea of a transfer of a family legacy onto that individual, almost like the passing of a baton. So I thought that this was very unique because sometimes people just think of a legacy as one dimensional. And one of the things we had talked about is it being a multifaceted, holistic idea that there has to be many different moving parts to make it work, but also there can be many different perspectives on it. So I thought you might be able to chat about this.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a family legacy is obviously, well, I understand it to be the legacy of an entrepreneurial family mainly. Yeah? I mean, it normally stems from a family business and the predecessors that worked in the business. But I believe it to be important that not only wealth and cash and capital gets passed on to the next generation, but that also the legacy gets passed on. So it's a part of the whole succession process. I believe, and in Be Wiser, we talk about that there is kind of three dimensions to succession. It's the wealth that needs to be passed on. It's the family business, as it were, the executive management, the operational business, but it's also the legacy that passes on to the children. It may be changed, and it will change eventually in the circumstances anyway, but there is that traditional legacy that the family sticks to, and that's an ideal situation if that is transferred, like in Europe many times, for hundreds of years, basically existing ever on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I just found it very interesting because with each path that an entrepreneur can take, there's different pressures, and some of them we just don't even think about, because if we don't walk in that individual shoes, we might not realize, like, for instance, if there's a next gen family member and they're expected to receive the legacy that their family has built. And they could, as we chatted about, they could get blamed again and again if they don't get it right. But what if they don't know the answers? What if they don't know, the right questions to ask or how to navigate in uncharted waters? Because unless they followed their parents or their grandparents around, there sometimes isn't a user's manual. And yet they're expected to know all the blind spots in how to move forward and not, embarrass the
Well,
family.
that's right. I mean, we say many times in these processes when I worked with families in the past, communication is key, you know, talk about it, you know, express it, talk about what do grandparents, parents, and everybody else, what do they receive, what do they think the legacy is. And you know, so I think the only way, you said like a guidebook or something, the only guidebook can be the family charta or the family governance, you know. So there you can write it down. I mean, you know, what are the family values, what do we perceive the legacy to be, and how is it relevant today, and how do we want to keep it going in the future? So it needs to be relevant for every generation, you know. It cannot just stick the old grandparents kind of thing. That may not be practical anymore. So it has to be changed, and it has to live and develop further.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you might share some slides in a moment, but one of the things I really liked is, again, how you also included the independent journey, because I think sometimes the self-esteem of an individual can be so enmeshed within their family and the expectations. And if they don't also have that opportunity to develop their inner self or their inner landscape, it can be, oh my goodness, it can be a lot of pressure and yeah, just whew. Not very many other people can understand that level of loneliness. So I think
Well,
that
absolutely. I mean, so in Be Wiser, we distinguish between three possible journeys, and I'll just show that picture very briefly, if you can see it okay. It's the entrepreneurial journey. So the individual gets involved in the operational business of the family business. It can be the wealth management journey, where you are not involved in the operational business, but possibly on the wealth side of things, developing the wealth, growing it further, investing it sensibly, and making best use of the capital. That's this part. Or, and that's what you just mentioned, the kind of independent journey. And that can be outside the family if somebody doesn't really want to get involved. But even then, you know, that person is part of the legacy, is possibly or definitely part of the family, maybe part of the business also. But that person, even if it's on the independent journey, needs to organize the wealth and the governance in a way that he or she can deal with it. And if I just switch to this page in the middle, you know, you see on what journey you go and embark on is dependent on a really great deal of self-reflection, as you also just mentioned. You know, you have to be clear what you want to be, what you want to do, what is your life, your sense in life, what do you want to reach. It's the skill set, what is your education, which university have you been, what are you good at. But it's also the commitment, what you are burning for, you know. What do you want to do? You may not be interested in that business, particularly in the operational side, but you may be interested in art. And then you go the independent way and do something different, but you are still part of the whole family system. So that cannot be changed. That's always there. So yeah, that's the different journeys we talk about in the Be Wiser Masterclass. Yeah.
yeah, yes. So that brings me to my next question, which is, what motivated you to develop your course?
Well, that's right. I mean, I mentioned that I've been in banking. I worked for a big advisory house, Ernst & Young, and was always an advisor. But then I changed on the light side of the force, you know, ultimately. So I finally joined my clients basically on the single family office side of things. And throughout the last few years in banking and EY, I got really concerned with impact investing. You know, how can you, first of all, family wealth together in essence for a family to make use of the economies of scale and of the wealth, but also to arrange it in a way by way of governance that they stick together, ideally. I know in some cases families fall apart and have to be separated. That's okay, that's fine, it happens, but the attempt should always be to keep it all together, because very often these are really great family legacies. So after this one-on-one consulting and banking, I really wanted to share my knowledge and that of my co-founder, Christian Stadermann. We worked together, and Tessie Anthony de Nassau. She's also part of it. And we wanted to prepare a master class to scale it up so that more people can see it. And it's not always a one-on-one, a very tedious one-on-one project, so that it's a more lighthearted, practical, independent education program. Financial education, really, by way of video learning. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, very much. And I think probably you also saw some of those family issues that come up, that it's more than just the money, it's that communication, it's the education, it's that self-discovery. So that brings me to my next question, which has to do with the 8 rules. And I don't know if you would like to share one of your slides here. The 8 rules to face and be able to process generational issues that come up. Because again, these are what I call like the pink elephants in a room. People, can sense that they're there, but they might not know how to approach them. And many times, if we're afraid of approaching a difficult subject or a tough conversation, we'll avoid it. But then the avoidance could be for years, and it needs to be confronted and unpacked.
Well, that's right. And we always say communicate and raise the issues early. Yeah, I mean, that's the basic principle. I mean, if people try and put something under the carpet, it will eventually come out, and it will then be an ever bigger problem. But I mean, there are lots and lots of recommendations and tips and tricks in the Be Wiser Masterclass, but these 8 rules really refer to the generational issues. So one is separate family from business. I mean, whilst we showed in the earlier picture, whilst the family is very intertwined with the business, the emotional things should stay apart. If the son is a bad manager and did a bad job in the office for one day, it's still the son, and let's not bring these things too much together. That's number one. The second is a systematic approach is needed as the family gets bigger, the wealth gets bigger, the wealth gets more diverse. Communication rules need to be set up. In big families with hundreds of members on different family branches, this is just best practice by now. I've just been last week in Dubai. Even the Middle Eastern families, they talk about family governance as well. So it's simply needed as the family gets bigger. Diversify your entrepreneurial risk. That's kind of management, the wealth. Diversification is key in many parts. Number 4 is managing the wealth can also represent a new identity, particularly when the family business was sold. So I've set up family offices for large entrepreneurial families. When the business was sold, the cash event has happened, and the family starts to diverge and go in different routes, but actually managing the capital can keep them together. Number 5 is create written plans as part of the governance. That's the family governance, it's a wealth governance, lots of other things. I don't go into detail now. Then look at the risk consideration, risk in cash and capital, but also risk if you don't get the wealth transfer process to the next generation right. So keep risk in mind all the time. And then manage the 3 dimensions of succession. I've mentioned it earlier: ownership, the ownership role, the management role, and the legacy. So these are important, because if you only look at passing the wealth to the next generation, you're missing out lots of other things. And then it's a kind of a more general point: avoid the top 5 reasons for unsuccessful generational transition. So if you look at all these books at academics talking about it, things go wrong when there is confusion about the role. Am I a family member? Do I work in the business? Am I an owner of the business? So get your roles right. Or if family members have different demand on the non-financial side of things, or what else can we point out here?
Those would be the expectations.
Yeah, that's right. The expectations generally, or conflicting demands on the cash flow. Maybe an uncle wants to have all the dividends out of the business, and you may put the money in to grow the business. So those kind of general things, as in governance, really need to be clear, because otherwise it can too easily go wrong. So the 8 rules to deal with generational issues. Yeah.
I think it's just lovely as a framework. So somebody could have some type of guidepost. So if they let's say they're not ready yet to hire an advisor, at least they can start here, because a lot of times, and this is one of the things that many coaches and consultants and advisors in this space talk about, when we look at the statistics, people aren't asking enough for outside help, or they're not even willing to have these conversations. But I think today they're starting to. And so if they could listen to this video or watch this video or listen to this podcast, it can be one reference point to begin. And if they have that list, they can go, okay, well, this is how I can approach this conversation and feel like I can come out the other side with, a plan, like you had said. Because
Absolutely.
sometimes people, yeah, those family meetings, oh, it could just be bickering, and but there needs to be some type of guidepost to move it forward, so it's forwarding the actions in addition to deepening the learning.
Absolutely. I mean, the idea is, I think you have to be very professional in managing this process, So, I mean, you're managing a family business in a professional way, a company. So why not manage your private side of things, the family issues and the private wealth similarly professionally? So that would be the target very clearly. And, the Be Wiser Masterclass is a learning journey in itself. It's a closed journey, learning journey, but it comes on top or alongside of any work with advisors, or if the family just gets on with it by themselves, so it's not conflicting other things. It's really, we say that also, that look at the rules, for example, these 8 rules or lots of other things, but then go back to your lawyer, go back to your banker, go back to your advisor and discuss it with them, raise these issues. You get tips and hints, and and raise them with the trusted people that you normally work with.
Yes, yes, I completely agree. And I think it is a starting point, your course. And I think that it's also excellent that there are courses around this topic coming online, because more than ever, the knowledge economy is coming online. And like we had spoken about, there needs to be conversations around this and topics and discussions, and not just, I mean, there's so many courses on the internet these days, but then where can somebody start if they're within this space and they want to talk about their legacy? And again, it's rare that we have these deeper conversations if it's with if we go to a social gathering, whether it's the coffee shop or a holiday party or something. It's these issues need to become unpacked so people don't store up all their emotions on the inside, and then show
Yeah.
up at a family meeting and have all these opinions and emotions stuffed down, and then not be able to be functional and logical about it to move forward.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm the last person that would say, personal meetings are not needed. I mean, for sure, especially in family gatherings and so on. That's clearly the optimum. But still, a learning journey like this can help those people that have no idea about these things to level up with the others, so that the violinist in the family can actually talk to the banker more and more, so otherwise there's too much misunderstanding. So it helps leveling people up. That's one thing. And the other thing is, it helps just to learn things in your kind of secure environment. You're not immediately exposed to the whole family. If you ask a stupid question, there are no stupid questions, but then still some people think that. So it's a good way and a modern way to learn your stuff quietly, and then use coaching or personal exchange on top of it anyway. So that's for sure. But it's a good start to understand things.
Yes, yes, very much so. And I think there is some expression about how if one family member starts to grow, there's almost an energetic ripple effect that happens with the other family members. I don't know how that works in the quantum world, but
Oh
again,
yeah.
we're just planting a seed that when there can be one person who's courageous enough to open their mind and begin to learn, then of course, like you had said, the ripple effect is the conversations with the other professionals on that team. So I want to throw out one of, and this is ironic that, but this is again in the quantum world, one of the, I don't know if it's a mantra or a logo of legacy planning, which is my kind of boutique coaching firm. But we have this expression, and the expression is, what apathy is doing to your legacy is just not right. And I found it so ironic that you had mentioned that there was a next gen, and this next gen was just so apathetic. Like he or she would show up to the meetings and be like, well, I don't care. And I think sometimes that can be a situation where it's somebody, yeah, you either have to reach them in their place of hunger, where they're hungry to grow and learn, or where they're safe enough. So would you share the story just from a vague bird's eye view?
Yes, yes. I mean, maybe to start this from a different angle is Karl Lagerfeld, who kind of everybody knows, isn't it? Has been asked once.
The fashion
Your
designer, yes.
Yes, yeah, well, sure, yes. Your father had a firm producing condensed milk, Carl was asked once. Could you imagine yourself taking the firm over from him? And Karl Lagerfeld just said, condensed milk was not my passion. So when you say apathy, um, you have to burn for these things, and people have to be interested, isn't it? I mean, it's really difficult if somebody just, or parts of the family just really switch off completely, like one of the next gens in a family that I'm still dealing with. And so you kind of have to find a way where you can get that person which is on the independent way, as I just said. It's not involved in the business nor in the wealth. It's in the independent way. And one thing, maybe like things like impact investing or sustainable investing, can be ways to pull these people back in. So that family actually has started a trust, a foundation to do certain subjects in Africa and in education. So, and the hope is that the children really deal with this together. They put in a certain capital stock into that foundation, and then each family member every year suggests certain projects that they want to invest in, and then the family council discusses this, sometimes with me, sometimes without me, and they choose the subject that they want to follow. So the hope is, in the long term, that even somebody that is on that independent track will at some point come back in, because he or she is part of the family. He or she will ultimately own part of the wealth, and many things can be delegated to bankers and lawyers, but the duty that you own the wealth and that you kind of have to deal with it cannot be delegated away. So I mean, ideally you have to have some clue what you want to do with it. Does that answer your question? Or
Yes, very much so. What I like about what you shared is that pardon the office phone ringing in the background. What I liked about that is that what you're speaking to is reaching in to understand what are the values of that individual, whether it's a senior member of the family, a junior member, a next gen, whatever those titles are, because everyone has a set of values, whether it's core values or aspirational values that drive them internally. And if that value can be brought to the surface, then what comes with it in a beneficial sense is that purpose and that contribution, so that person can feel like, it's more than just reasons to wake up in the morning and on a personal level, but it's a way also to bond and unite with others, to
yes.
give the best of themselves, so they feel
I
like
had a
they're
family once, which they had 5 family branches, and one family branch, the one in southern Germany, I shouldn't name it any closer now, didn't want to be part of the family council setup, of the family governance, of the family office. So they were actually quite disastrous discussions in the past. But then
passionate conversations.
I was sent to southern Germany and deal with that family in a day, that branch. And it was really interesting, because like, if suddenly an independent person comes in and just asks simple questions, what is your problem with all this setup, and then one of the senior guy in the family said, oh, that lady named XYZ shouldn't be involved. And I said, why? She's doing it, she likes it, she's doing it for you as well. And so, to cut a long story short, in 2 or 3 visits and getting them back to the table, we did actually manage to get that family involved, and they are now part of the family office, and they are part of the family governance. So sometimes fairly simple, to be honest. Problems are big, but if an external person asks some objective and factual kind of questions and says, what really is your problem? And it's often not a real problem. It's really just historic, psychological, they never liked each other, even in the kindergarten or whatever, and things have gone on, and sometimes they can be solved, but again, I say that, I mean, in some cases families have to separate, families have to go different ways, and that can also be a solution, but ideally we would like to keep it all together.
Yes, very much. Well, I think what you had referred to as those neutral questions from an objective outside party can bring about new answers, new possibilities. But if people are stuck in their patterns and their ruts, they don't think about looking at a situation and reframing it or looking at it with fresh eyes. And I think that's where, an outside advisor or coach can come in and be able to look at that and not have those same biases or
Yes.
judgments, and pull out the best from that person, so that even if there are those resentments that people have and they bring forward through those years, that it's also remembering that there are still commonalities, even if there might be a difference of opinions, or
Oh, absolutely.
in
Especially relating back to the legacy, as we discussed earlier. So if you bring that in and they really do relate to that legacy, then there are commonalities. And if the coach stays totally impartial, then this can be overcome very often. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I know one of the things we joked about also is there are many times there are strong personalities, strong characters, but if their energy can be redirected, then it can go from a passion of resenting something to a passion of wanting to bring something together. Yes. Okay. So
Go
would you?
forward together. Go
Yeah,
forward
yes.
together. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, because someone can be just as passionate about creating something lovely and beautiful as they are about like hating their cousin, or or, or something,
Exactly.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever it may be. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just
Yeah.
a kind of alchemy of the emotions and feelings. Okay, so would you be so kind to touch upon the highlights of your 9 modules? And I know that it's proprietary information for your course, but maybe you could just kind of just touch lightly upon the 9 modules, because I think that these are terrific cornerstones to guide somebody. It's kind of like, my metaphor is like a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout leader guiding their client through the woods to the canoe by the lake, and telling them, watch out for the poison ivy, and you'll be okay, you'll make it to the canoe by the lake.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, so maybe I show this very briefly. I mean, there is a lot of material as part of Be Wiser. And by the way, it's like totally independent. So there are no banks or no sponsors or no subjects, no products offered. It's totally holistic, which in my view is very important, so that you look at your wealth on a holistic basis, be it the business, the cash, but also human and social capital and these things. And it's enabling. So the modules would always be practical and you can make use of them, and they enable you. So the subjects you asked about are generational issues, generational conflicts. To start with, just to define them, talk about them, the Be Wiser method, which is explaining these 5 dimensions of wealth, as I just very quickly mentioned. Then we go into the roadmap, the different journeys that I described earlier. Then in module 4, we talk a lot about governance, family governance, corporate governance, wealth governance. How are they actually set up? What would be the content? And then, so these are all the family issues, but then we also go into the financial education part. So how to manage your wealth. So how do you derive a strategic asset allocation from your values? How do you implement a wealth structuring? What is sustainable investing? How do you do it? Impact investing, everything. And then very important, a bit more kind of boring, controlling and risk management. So even if you are on that independent journey, you still want to have certain reports, you still want to be sure that the risk is dealt with in the most positive way. And then the module 9 kind of brings it all together, your role position, how do you get started, and then there are 3 basic modules: investing, stocks and bonds and everything. It's on illiquid investing, private equity and venture capital, and it's on current trends, so like robo-advisors, ETFs, hedge funds, and so on. So that you know what they are, and what's going on, and can ask the right questions. This is more for the artist in the family, and the banker would know these things in the basic modules. but the other people should actually look at it so that they can discuss, what kind of products would they actually want to use. Yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. And I think that the financial education is a key part of somebody being able to own their wealth and own that space. Because one of the things I also mentioned to you in our preamble was I know individuals that have come into a significant amount of money, let's say 9 figures, and then they will make a single investment that can wipe out 7 figures. And
Absolutely.
because they listened to one person, they didn't do their due diligence, their ego got so big. And I think that, again, if we're not having these conversations, comfortably at Starbucks, at the coffee shop. I mean, again, it's like, where do we have these conversations honestly, where someone else can say to us, "Hey, I think these are some blind spots in your financial education, and let's just start here." Whether it's the basics or the intermediate or a refresher course, so you don't lose 7 figures, but also the sleepless nights that go along with when somebody could beat themselves up of, gosh, how did I make that decision? I should have known better, and now all these other people are going to judge me, and yeah, and then they have to wear that mask so tight because they don't want to, face that shame of if they make a mistake, even if that is human. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, mistakes are human, absolutely, and no masterclass will save you for doing mistakes, but it's bringing up your knowledge to a certain extent. I mean, look, we live in a VUCA world, in a volatile, catastrophic world. I don't need to tell you all about these things now, but and it's difficult. It really is difficult more than ever before to manage your wealth, to steer your family through difficult times. So the better you are educated and the more you know the ins and outs, the more likely you are not to fall into a trap, by a fool that messes around with you, or by doing slightly less dangerous stuff. But I mean, still, it's the risk management. It's the whole thing, how you can keep your wealth together. It's so important in these times. Otherwise, there are too many traps and too many crooks running around and trying to get your money. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And before I move to the next question, I just wanted to highlight something. This is where I'm going to plug advisory services, okay? There was a very interesting statistic that I read with, I think the Harvard Business Review interviewed a number of executives and chief executive officers, CEOs, and it said 40% of their time is basically unpacking like a mission review. It's looking at the baseline and being able to understand what is it that they're looking at clearly. And I think this is important because if they can have a coach or an independent advisor be able to offer them honest feedback, then they can be much more protected in making the best decisions. And then another 40% of what CEOs and executives do for most of their time is cultivate relationships. And so the kind of the key for this conversation in this first podcast we will converse together was about those family issues. And so this idea of cultivating relationships, we're expected to know it, but that's even an art and a science in itself. Because if we don't like our cousin or a family member or someone on the team, again, we go back to how do you cultivate that relationship so it can be genuine, not just friendly, but we're not friends.
Absolutely, and as the family grows, people go onto different routes, live in different countries, don't see each other so often, get involved in different things, have totally different mindsets. So as the family grows, but also as the wealth, as I said earlier, gets more diversified, like if you have one bank account, if the whole family has one bank account and there is the one figure in there and that's it, that's easy to manage, relatively easy to manage. But if, one son holds the real estate, the other daughter holds venture capital companies, then it gets really difficult, to manage the whole thing and keep it all up to date. And that's why governance and systematic approaches to these things, networking in the family and outside the family, choose the right advisors, are crucial, absolutely crucial. And if you asked me what I'm hoping for today, if somebody watches the masterclass and then asks 5 better questions in the meeting with his or her banker, that's already a great achievement then, so big mistakes can be avoided.
Yeah, and it's also giving them the client personal agency, more personal agency. So yeah. And in fact, there's an expression in the coaching and advisory world that if the client decides it, they own it. But if
Yes.
the right, but if we offer it, it's like, yeah,
Well, but no,
it's
that's a very good point. I always say the next generation needs to own the family charta. Yeah, they need to. It's not okay if it sits in a drawer and nobody ever looks at it. It needs to live. They need to own it. And by the way, you looked at risk earlier. You can lose all these millions, but you can also by educating yourself on family and on wealth issues, you can also get more into the driver's seat, so that you actually can drive it forward in a way that you want it, to make it relevant for yourself, and again, ultimately own the whole thing, so it's not an indifferent pot of money, it's something you can make with it, ultimately, again and again, I come to that point, impact investing, so that you are really doing fascinating investments that kind of save the world, or parts of it, and maybe really interesting startups, and also then you can identify much more with it, and it makes more sense to deal with this.
yes, yes, very cool. So, Peter, since this is a legacy podcast, how do you see this word legacy personally for your life? And what would you like your holistic legacy to be?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I'm not coming from a wealthy family. So, I mean, I said earlier, I worked in a bank, I worked at EY, so you earn a little bit of money. And I do my own smallish impact investments, which is great. I have one daughter and happy family. We three of us. So, if that kind of combines with a little bit of impact investing and with my own co-founding of Be Wiser, and if that helps other families to deal with this, that's fine. I really like interacting with entrepreneurial families, and also with strong characters. They very often are strong characters. So I would like to have helped a lot of families to keep their legacy and their wealth together. That would be what I want. And then if impact investing can be a part of it, that would be great also. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. So I'm hearing values around contribution and connection and education, or kind of what say you?
Sorry again, I didn't.
Oh, what would you say your values are? Like I'm hearing contribution, a value around education, and a
Yeah, well,
value.
yes, sorry. Yeah, it's education. Well, if you look at the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, they are all important. But I have committed a lot to education because I think education is so crucial to bring people out of poverty. It relates to so many things for self-esteem. My daughter studies psychology, so she's very much on that route as well. So I think education is absolutely crucial. And then I am working, indeed, I'm a member of TONIC, of the global family office community that does impact investing. I've started and co-founded an impact investing community here in Germany. So the other thing is really using your capital to the best of the world and humans and life on earth. So some people just shout at capitalism is bad or something, but I don't know, but if wealthy people can make the most of investing their wealth to sustain our earth and our living here on earth, I think that's absolutely needed, if not too late already. But let's try and do what we can as long as we are here.
Yes, yes, very much. Lovely. Thank you for speaking into that. I think that when somebody can leverage their resources for the good of all humanity, the good of their family, the good of their life, then education is key to being able to move them from those places of uncertainty to the places of living out to their values and developing them in alignment with their life. So thank you so much. And I'll make sure to include in the show notes any of the articles. I think you wrote one for Global Law and Business in September of 2022. But what's the best website or place that if somebody wanted to learn more, that they might be able to reach you?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn, so you find all my activities on LinkedIn, and then www.bwiser.com. Obviously, I just show that again here. LinkedIn, Be Wiser, and then there were several articles written by me in the Family Office Journal. There was an article not long ago, end of last year, on financial education, and quite a bit on impact investing. I'm also the managing director of a German publication on impact investing. So anybody reaches out, LinkedIn is probably the easiest, so you can easily find me. Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Mr. Brock, for bringing this conversation forward to make it a global discussion, which was the intention we set at the start of this podcast episode, and also just being willing to share your slides as a starting point so that whoever is watching or listening can understand that your services are a resource and you can help guide to them when it comes to this subject of their legacy, whether it's the transfer of legacy, a family legacy, or that independent journey of one's own legacy. So thank you so much for joining. And for anyone who's listening on YouTube, please remember to like and subscribe. Or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please remember to rate and review. So thank you so much for joining us this week. And thank you, Mr. Brock, for speaking into
Thanks
your
from
legacy.
my part as well. Thank you, Angelina. It was really great. And everybody reaches out if you have questions. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.